value continues to increase because now you can get a number of calls if you look at the permutations, right? If you go to 5 calls, then there's even more calls than 10. Okay, so this is an ongoing optimization, but you have to keep an eye on these metrics almost every single day, every single week. How much are we spending to acquire a customer? Is that customer coming back? Is that now forming a network effect? That the more sellers come in, the more buyers come in. These are the critical growth metrics in a marketplace. Most people might call them engagement metrics. I'll just call them for what they are. That, you know, it's about retention, about watching customer acquisition cost and relating it to the long-term value based on the retention that you get. And then the network effects, which is developing over time as more and more people use your platform. Now, how do you make money? Now, I laid out the 4 key most popular monetization strategies of most marketplaces. The number one, if you look at on that spectrum of very open marketplaces like classified sites like Gigi, then is listing fee, where people pay per post, or it's a property site like Property 24, or it's a Brighter Monday for jobs. You know, people might pay per post, right? People also pay for visibility, which is maybe you listed for free, but if you want to appear at the top, then you pay a small fee for that, right? The other model is actually charging for the software, which you can subscribe to it. And I think we've just mentioned how this would work in a typical startup. Let's say, for example, a Fundi marketplace. You might actually charge Fundis every time they use your quotation template to send a quotation to somebody. You might charge them $100 to send a quotation. So the inbuilt software can become a software that actually makes you money through subscription, even though it also captures you the sales side or the supply side of the platform. The last and most commonly used one is the take rate, which I've kind of talked about a little bit. You're taking commission for every transaction that happens on the platform. For example, at GoVerba, we take upwards of 8% seller commission for every transaction that happens. Uber takes about 25% for rider fees. Airbnb takes 3% from the host and 6% from the guest, 6% to 12%. Upwork, which is a freelancer site, takes 5% to 20% of the bill. So these are models of monetization that you have to keep thinking about as you go along with your marketplace. And none of them fits the bill for whatever side of the marketplace. But I think the rule of thumb you can see for most open marketplaces, listing fee and visibility fee is something that happens. If you look at the evolution of some of the platforms now, I think there's somebody in the call. There's a startup that I'm also looking at. They're called CarPro, and they're actually moving from not just classifieds, but also they facilitate the sale of the car. So they will take a take rate, even though they kind of act starting with as a classifieds, but they're actually involved in the transaction. And if you look at most of the classifieds marketplaces where they are going now, is in the transactional facilitation world. Now, this is Etsy P&L. Etsy is a listed company, as I had told you earlier, that does facilitate the sale of crafts items, starting in 2005. If you look at this, is the year 2020 Q1 revenue. They had a huge revenue jump because of selling masks. We also saw the same thing on GoVerba. But you can see the different revenue streams that they have: listing fee, transaction fee, and they also enable payments. One thing here that you can also look at is, for example, the way we want to start doing lending on the platform of facilitating people to actually borrow gas. That becomes another separate revenue stream, even though you're actually facilitating balance sheet owners or financial services guys to actually lend to people who are in the platform. So it's still like a take rate, but it's an added type of a take rate, which is not just about the sale of the commodity, but the sale of a loan. Right. What are some of the pitfalls that you must watch out for? Now, and this is one of the things I've heard from a number of guys who start marketplaces here. One thing you have to be watchful about is grey trade. Now, grey trade is where you facilitate, let's say, a worker who's, let's say, you run a cleaning marketplace, right? And you facilitate somebody to go into someone's house to do the cleaning through your marketplace. Then they become friends, and that the person actually books them for the next 2 weeks. And that happens without having gone through your marketplace. Now, that's what we call grey trade. Now, you'll see that people have tried to do that also on ride hailing. They also try it sometimes on GoBeba, where maybe somebody has delivered groceries to you, and you tell them, hey, can you also go get for me these particular items? So grey trade is there. What we actually, however, see is that it is more prevalent in professional services rather than in commoditized services, like, for example, what we do or what Uber does. Because the commoditized services don't create a lot of relationships. You actually, there are some times that I've gone in through with an Uber, and I never saw the driver's face because I sat at the back and I paid the guy via M-Pesa, and I was on my laptop doing some work. And I'm happy he's gotten me where I was. He could even call me to tell me maybe I forgot something. But the relationship is never that established like that of a cleaner coming into your house. So grey trade is more common in professional services type of marketplaces, recruitment services, cleaning services, fundi services, and those kind of services. Now, how do you deal with this? And I've had a few guys with fundi marketplaces lament about this issue. Now, there are a couple ways of solving this grey trade issue. Number one, as we talked about the configuration of your marketplace, where you have the marketplace layer, the infrastructure layer, and the data layer, you can increase the infrastructure layer to offer more tools to the producer so that it's almost like a software as a service again. Or you can increase even more services, maybe like training them, maybe providing tools, maybe even providing a whole workshop if it's fundis. And they just, because they don't have the tools, they have to come to your workshop and build things from there. And that would just mean that you will probably eliminate a lot of grey trade. Because if you have a prevalence in grey trade, what it means is that you have a leaky bucket. The retention rate narrows significantly. And when the retention rate narrows, then you are in a doggy business. Because then the customer acquisition cost that the cost you're using to acquire customers and retaining them, it's like you're going to be spending that money forever. Now, if you look at on the consumer side, if you offered some lending services on this marketplace where maybe the fundi is doing a project, maybe it's it costs a bit of money, maybe it's 100,000 to repair a pipe, and the person doesn't have the money, they would have to come to your platform to borrow the cash. So they would have to come back, and the fundi would have to use the platform. So these are some of the ways that you can narrow grey trade. It always happens, but you can really narrow it to a certain level that then it doesn't impact on the unit economics of the business. Couple of guys who've done this very well is a company like Clarity. Now, Clarity is actually a marketplace that brings together business advisors and startups. And so what they've done is that they've built up software in their platform for things like call management and invoicing. So many business advisors don't want to get into the hand of, and especially if they're just solo businesses, into the whole thing of investing in a call management software or invoicing software. If you provide that on the cloud on an ongoing basis, and they pay for it only when the transaction has passed through the platform, then they would love it. And if you look at it, this call management software, because it bills per minute, meaning that when you start calling this particular advisor, you start getting charged. So it's almost like they are building a small little tower for them to be able to bill their clients by the hour. Now, this means that every time the advisor wants to talk to you, they don't want to talk to you outside of Clarity because they can't bill it. So this way, they've been able to eliminate gray trade. Another pitfall, which I have seen in our market, is what do you do when actually you don't have supply abundance? Meaning that you're trying to facilitate these trackers, but yeah, there are actually there are only a few tracks available. So there's actually not much fragmentation. Actually, what you find yourself doing in that instant is to actually pay the trackers more than what the market actually would pay them for them to be on your platform. It's actually a very dangerous marketplace to build. And the way to solve it is actually to figure out maybe you can improve supply by either targeting the supply side that maybe has the trucks. It could be that the big companies that have trucks might be interested in you giving them for free a tracking software. And if you give them for free the tracking software, again, back to the SaaS conversation, they might be willing to actually use your platform for bookings that they already do. But as they do those bookings, then you can actually start bringing the trade to your end. So it's quite a tough position. I think some of the tracking marketplaces that are in the market are probably already experiencing it. I do expect this to continue because I think there is only a certain number of supply of trucks in the market. And this is not just in Africa or Kenya, it's also in the US. We see a lot of these truckers having a challenge in attracting supply side. Now, we talked about unit economics. So the one thing that you want to keep a tab on is the lifetime value of a customer. How do you calculate this? Now, you have your gross margins. You have your gross merchandise value, which is the transaction value of what was transacted through the platform. Now, you get the net revenue by looking at the take rate that you picked. Now, if you take that net revenue, remove any kind of costs that might have been incurred into it, either promotional cost or any other cost. For example, if you have a bag that the motorcycle guys use, it's actually a cost. Even if you've given them the bag, you do need to actually account for that bag because it depreciates. And at the end of the year or the end of 6 months, you might have to give them another one. So you need to bring that cost and measure what that cost per order. When you get the cost per order, then you can get the contribution margin. Now, every time you attract a customer, whether it's through Google or Facebook, then you can also measure the cost of acquiring that customer by dividing the number of customers you got by the cost that by the money you spent on them. Now you compare the long-term value and the customer acquisition cost, and when you do that, it gives you a good insight on whether you are following the rule of thumb or not. So how do you get the long-term value? You got the net contribution margin per order. Multiply that by the frequency of ordering. For example, for us, gas customers come to us every 6 weeks, so we have a frequency of about 8.5. So if we are earning, let's say, 200 bob per mutungi, you can multiply that by 8.5 or by 8 to get the 12 months long-term value. Now, if the long-term 12 months long-term value is not greater than 2 times your customer acquisition cost, now you are in trouble, because it just shows that you are engaging in a business where at the unit level, you might actually not be able to repay itself. So it's important that you actually constantly monitor the unit economics. Now, I think that's about it on the platforms, how to start, how to grow. Now, I want to spend like the next 15 minutes before we end on, okay then, that's all great about the context of marketplaces and how to grow them. what is happening in Kenya and what is happening in Africa. So I think the lay of the land, as I said earlier, if it's day one in other markets, in ours it's not even day one. It's actually 3 a.m. in the morning. Digitization has just started rising, and it's rising fast. If you look at a quote, some quotes by two gentlemen that I love to read from, they both have almost similar quotes. One from Bill Gates. It says, "We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Amara, one of the leading futurists, the late Amara, also says that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect of it in the long run." It couldn't be more true than what these gentlemen are saying when we look at the landscape of the digital marketplaces, the e-commerce sector, any internet-driven industry in sub-Saharan Africa and actually the entire African continent. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. Things have not even started. And a good example you can get is, I'm sure some of you here, not all of you, did use some of these devices here. I remember I worked on a project like this one where I was an intern, and the target was actually to increase the number of lines per 100 people from 1.6 to 5 by 2015. And this project was actually being done by increasing the number of booths in the country in other towns. So actually we were building more booths towards 2015 so that we could improve the access of telephony lines per 100 people to 5 from 1.6 by 2015. Now, a few things happened that reshaped this reality. So the better option and the talk and then the yes talk. I don't know how many people in the core remember this. And obviously what happens from here, those are the fixed line telephony lines over time from 1993. You can see actually they go diminishing. And those are the mobile lines as this launch happened of the better option and the yes card. And what really happened is that the tele density went to 70 in a period of less than 15 years. So by that 2015, instead of going to five number of lines per 100, it went to 70 lines per 100 lines. So about 15 times what was expected. But the most important thing is that the solution that made this catch up were not what was initially thought. It was these gadgets that you can see here that most of you now despise as Mulika Mwizis. And you can see the booths became places where people tie their donkeys and goats and other things rather than the places they would go for important calls. So that's based on that idea. What you see is that as the addressable market grows, the businesses become more viable, right? And that's what is happening with the e-commerce digital marketplaces. I've been on this for the last like 7 years in country and 3 more years outside of the country. And I can tell you that as the digitization happens, the addressable market is growing. And so the businesses and the startups are becoming more and more viable than they were in 2012, in 2007. And so in addition to retail, which is kind of what I thought the discussion might have more been driven to because of the e-commerce part, the opportunity for digital-driven platforms and marketplaces are everywhere. When you look at housing, whether you look at healthcare, whether you look at agriculture, whether you look at education, financial services, transport and logistics, and they are just about everywhere. And it's about guys following some of those principles that we've talked about, if you want to launch one, to be able to kick off. For corporates, I think that would be a different perspective because this digitization and to be able to actually capture its value, you're gonna have to probably almost launch a separate business unit if you're not already running a marketplace business. So if you look at it, the stages of 2004-2012 was the stages of laying the infrastructure around Africa. Then 2012, 2017, we saw a few scalable marketplaces starting to establish themselves, the Jumias, the OLX, the Kongas in Nigeria. But still, even after all that, the percentage of retail sales happening through the internet was actually less than 1% in most of these markets that were launching. If you look at going forward into 2023, you see more of the services like what we are offering now, the online to offline kind of services, mobile payments, marketplaces. And I think we'll see a couple of IPOs along the way as AI and blockchain starts to complement and improve some of the services. And so 5 key disruptive forces I see in retail, of course, is the pricing, where the prices are probably much lower. Selection, which means that you can get much more selection than at retail. Convenience, distribution, where, as I talked about earlier, we can be in Rongai, you can be in Gong in such a short time without having to build kind of retail shops. And then the cost center is different because you don't have a front-facing store. It means that your cost center is predominantly driven by marketing, but those costs go low as you get more and more retention in customers. So that means that the fixed cost of the stores, as you avoid it, you can actually only spend the variable cost of marketing, which you can lower as you go along, as more growth happens. Now, look at some of the evolving business models. Now, in Nairobi, everybody has a boda guy who they send to the chemist, to the butchery, to mama burgers, to dry cleaner. As urbanization increases and consumption also increases, what you end up is a very, very key need for convenience because of congestion, retail still being pretty mature, and smartphone penetration. So the need for convenience shopping has never been greater. And this is where GoBeba comes in as an e-commerce logistics platform that combines both product discovery and on-demand logistics to match both the suppliers of logistics and the suppliers of things to consumers. And that's really what has driven our business. This is kind of a business case moving forward, driving better price transparency, driving a good on-demand logistics system, driving trust and better communication. Now, lastly, as I end my deck, as we go to questions, in the realm of your entrepreneurial pursuits, for those who want to go into this, you always find yourself pursuing 3 types of opportunities as an entrepreneur. Number 1 is a kiosk type of an opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with it. It actually serves the needs of the society pretty well. You might also see yourself chasing other types of opportunity, which I'll go through. With this kiosk, it's probably a perpetual survival mode, where you find that probably this person, if you actually offer them an alternative thing as an employment, they would actually probably take it instead of the kiosk. The other one is a lifestyle type of business. And this, as we go back to what we talked about earlier in the business models, consulting is one of them. Some restaurants that are very much centric on you maintaining your lifestyle. Tenderpreneurship is another one. Usually they come with instant gratification, and that's why they are called lifestyle businesses, because everything you earn, it has to be spent in improving your lifestyle. So you don't actually scale, you actually end up scaling more, you are optimizing your lifestyle. So great lifestyle. Lastly, it's a high growth business, which is more innovation-led, technology-led, which is more patient, long-term focused payoff, as you saw from my earlier presentation around how long it has taken Amazon or Etsy to become what they've become. It's because of that patience and reinvesting any of the proceeds back into technology building, and maybe even agreeing to sell some of your shares to investors so that they can actually give you more capital for you to be able to scale. So these are the three types of opportunities that I think you might find yourself pursuing as an entrepreneur. So I prefer to work on the high growth bit and leave the other ones for other people. And I think I'm going to end there, and I'm going to take any questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Quite accelerating. I think it's interesting, first of all, to note and for giving us hope on one thing, that the e-commerce industry, and especially in Africa, is still nascent. It's just budding, it's just growing. There's a lot of potential. I mean, the education sector should be thriving right now with anybody who basically has a lot of consultation ideas, help them basically scale up with what we are having in terms of online learning and engagement. It's amazing. One of the things I'm picking also, the need for convenience shopping is greater. That has driven what Gobeba is doing today, right? And I think it's quite interesting that most of us and all of us can be able to pick out a few things. I'll have two questions, which basically will have winners. So I'm hoping that we are not going to have this presentation redone for us to get the questions, because if you were not attentive, you're not getting a free Abujani 3-week masterclass course coming to you shortly. So please make sure, if you've noted any notes, I'll be asking some questions just to ensure we have some 2 winners, at least a lady and a gentleman at the end of this particular session. Over and above that, there are quite some good number of questions, Peter. So thank you very much for having initiated that fire in us to think about what is it exactly we want to do with ourselves, especially when it comes to reinventing ourselves, because I mean, that is reinventing. That was a very interesting analogy to use the tele networking.
Yes.
Because at some point in time in 2000, I want to believe that's when a lot of all these e-commerce, Africa started actually exploring matters to deal with e-commerce. And there's a lot of growth at that point in time. And everyone was thinking about USSD codes and being able to do a couple of things. I remember someone came up with an application for farmers to be able to query for pricings during those times. I mean, it's quite interesting that we've actually going and have gone very well. Just a few things I need to mention before we get into the questions. A couple of things just to mention. Content is king. That is something I picked from your conversation, because at the end of the day, if you do not have the right content, then you're not driving the right traffic to your business at the end of the day. So that is very important. Then the idea of constantly monitoring your unit economics, because at the end of the day, if you have a very good idea, but you can really measure what it's bringing in, then I think you're lost. You might actually be as good as closing your business at the end of the day. And a very interesting phrase that you mentioned, it's not about tech, it's about creating interactions. Exactly. So if you can't create interactions, then I mean, it doesn't matter what remote sensing technologies you have, you will never get anywhere, right? So what is very interesting, I'll rather now get back to you reacting to some of the questions that have been raised. And if there's still some questions coming through, please, to all the participants, please feel free to raise them. And there is a gentleman called Fred. Peter Fred has said, I'm curious to know how the service and agribusiness industry can make money online. For example, if you run a barbershop or if you are involved in fish farming, for instance. So he's curious to know how the service and agribusiness industry can make money online. I think some of the things you have discussed in your talk have alluded to some of the ways guys can actually look at opportunities in these particular areas. Can I mention the other questions? You can note them down and then answer them as we go.
Yeah, that's fine. But let me note them. So let me answer Fred first.
Great.
So that we go to the next question. So,
thank you.
So Fred, I think I would encourage you to look at Proxy. So Proxy is a PRCSEA, Proxy. Now, Proxy is one of the largest fish marketplaces in the world. It's actually a UK-based. It's a specialist fish fish industry marketplace. The customers are more the restaurants and resellers of fish, like the ones maybe in Soko. And what Proxy does actually is to enable them get a constant supply of fresh fish from fishermen who would be, let's say, from Kisumu or Naivasha or whatever. And I think it almost works like, I don't know whether guys know Twiga Food. So Proxy is one of the largest online fish markets. And I think that's a pretty decent example to have a look at, that there's huge potential. If you actually look at the availability of tilapia, I see most of the people who run restaurants, they have to wake up in the morning and go and look for it in the city market, or they have to keep looking for this guy who is known to probably bring it around. So if you look at the qualities that we talked about earlier, about where it becomes rich to establish a marketplace, I think the fish industry has all elements of that. Fragmented fishermen, important distribution infrastructure probably that is lacking in the logistics scene of refrigerated trucks. And then on the other hand, you have people who would want the fish delivered to them without having to go through the city market. So I don't think that from a digital platform point of view, there's something there by engaging fish farmers, but also you do need to build the infrastructure that enables them to actually get that stuff. What I see with these kind of marketplaces that are infrastructure heavy at the beginning is you build and establish some standards. Maybe you end up owning the first 5 trucks, but because you generate a lot of demand, what you start doing, and I think we've seen Amazon starting to do this, you start now being able to tell people who could be investors in a truck to actually invest in the truck. And because you're generating demand through your marketplace, now you can specify standards of what the truck should look like, or the vehicle and how refrigerated should be, and what temperatures the fish should be carried in. And then from there, you stop now investing in the infrastructure.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. And you mentioned it's called Proxy. So just spell that again. Proxy
is P-R-C-S-E-A. Yeah.
P-R-C-S-E-A.
P-R-O. See, let me type it.
Okay, you type it there so that at least everybody can see. I've just tried to type something. As you type that, there is an interesting question that you mentioned, Twiga Foods. Yeah. A gentleman by the name Mike. Mike says, thanks, Peter, great presentation. What do you think about the future of businesses such as Twiga Foods? Do you think, that is now question 1, and do you think Kenyans are most likely to go back to their normal way of doing things post-COVID? Of course, that is a typical behavior of most human beings. Maybe we just want this to die and then we can go back to what we used to do. But then he still asks again another question. What can we learn from the push and pull between teachers and parents on online learning? It'd be interesting, yes. Yeah.
So the first question is from Mike, yes. Is on Twiga, right?
Yes, yeah.
And then the other one is on teachers and parents in court.
Right, yes.
Okay, let's start with Twiga. Now, I think if you look at the way I've answered that question on fish, it's actually not very different from what Twiga has been able to do. They've done a tremendous job, heavy lifting where many people never went, and aggregating farmers. And if you really look at what is the long-term evolution of Twiga, you know, they've built a heavy infrastructure. If you look at the model I presented around marketplace versus infrastructure versus data,
right.
What they've done is they've built a lot of infrastructure, including their own trucks. I think they have over 110 trucks with them. And what will happen is they will start outsourcing, and this is what I think, they'll start outsourcing those trucks and they'll be less truck heavy, but they'll have established standards and established demand. So they will have solved the chicken and egg issue in the first place. And then what you'll see is that they will start probably becoming a more of a commodities exchange platform. And I think most likely it's already starting to happen, where you can actually bid your commodities, whether they are potatoes or onions, on Twitter to be able to get the best price. And if you get the best price from them, then they already have the entire infra of making it happen to be delivered to the either mama mbogas, maybe with restaurants, maybe even with houses. So the long-term evolution, if you ask me, is I think it's going to be an extremely profitable business with very good unit economics and extremely high barriers to entry because of the way they've locked in the supply side of the market.
Great. Thank you. On the matters of e-learning and
yeah. So on e-learning, I do think that part of what is driving court cases is both sides of the equation, both the parents and also the schools. First of all, the schools don't know how to price digital learning. And parents also on the other side of the marketplace don't know the value of digital learning fully. So they see it as a hobbyist thing that they are being asked to pay for, yet the schools are spending resources of teachers developing the content, but also the schools are housing a very different business model in an old legacy business model. So the cost structure for e-learning would actually be thinner because the minute you develop it, you develop a course, it can be distributed to so many students, right? So then the cost will be much, much lower. But if you house it within the same business model that does the classroom-based learning, then the cost structure remains the same. And that's why they keep wanting to charge the parents for it. So it's a catch-22 situation. Both of them would have to learn the value that each of them is offering. But I also think that this, for the schools and for our education system, is actually the time now to start moving the learning from bricks and mortar only. And now even maybe regulate and have clear regulations of digital only schools. That would actually shift the cost structure from being used as an old cost structure of a classroom that has building, that has a playfield, to one that has software engineers and a studio that produces content.
Great. That is a very elaborate answer. I think most of the institutions should have attended this session to really appreciate that we have to really have to separate the two. The old traditional way of doing things will have to really basically fizzle out. We need to basically introduce this. So yes, I think it's something to grapple with, and I'm hoping we have a few of the entrepreneurs here in this particular call who will be willing to actually consult on these particular issues to help these particular schools appreciate and understand. Let me, before I go to the next question, just ask the winning question. So I'm looking for a winner, at least one, two winners, a lady and a gentleman. And I will ask the question that I will expect that you will hopefully type. The first person to type and answer the question correctly will be the winner, at least to attend the next course for Abu Jani that is going to take place in June. So the next 3-week masterclass on personal finance. What are the 3 types of business models as indicated in Peter Ndiangui's presentation today? Please mention the 3 types of business models that Peter Ndiangui indicated during his presentation today. The first person, male or female, to get this particular thing right will get a free slot for them to attend the next masterclass. I'll ask another question in between as we go with this particular session, just to get the other contestant who's going to be able to run and attend the next personal finance course with Abu Jani. Asante sana. So the next question is, as you begin without tech, are operational costs higher than what it will be when you start with tech? So from traditional to tech, if you begin without tech, how are operational costs in that regard? So that is a question on operational costs.
Now, the operation costs are dependent on the activities that you do, right? So developing software is by itself an operational cost. It's an OpEx. If you go and do a Facebook post, it's an operation cost. So obviously, one of the things that you reduce is the OpEx of developing software. Now, in certain instances, for example, the Twiga one, if you're building more infrastructure that is not tech-based, then obviously the OpEx is high. But where you're not building as a huge infrastructure, and you're only trying to avoid software development with things that don't scale, you actually find that per unit, it's actually probably high per unit cost, but because you haven't built scale yet. But in the scheme of things, from a startup point of view of your overall business expense or operational cost, is actually going to be minimal because you are not hiring expensive technology resources. And then what you're doing is you're using maybe the first 100 orders or 100 customers to be able to prove a point and get to know exactly where the value lies. There's a gentleman that I did some work with who was launching a recruitment platform. I'm just giving this example so that Faith can understand how the OpEx works. And so I asked him, man, can I actually use your platform? Because you spent like 2 years developing a pretty decent recruitment platform. Can I use your platform actually to hire some resources? This was actually when we were recruiting some guys for Gubeba. And the guy said, yeah. So I set out there what we needed to hire, and he posted it. And guess what? After 2 or 3 days, we didn't actually get a hire or anybody interested in that role. Yet he had spent like 2 years, spent quite some millions of shillings building this thing. Then I told him, hey, why don't you just test? Do you actually have a Facebook page? And he was waiting to launch the software and then also build a Facebook page. So actually this particular day, he went to Facebook, started his page, and he posted the role we wanted to recruit. And actually that day, before the end of the day, he had about 20 applicants who were interested in our job. So he spent time now skewing through the resumes and trying to establish whether any of those candidates were qualified. So he ended up sending me 3 CVs after like 2 days of work of skimming through the resumes. And actually ended up hiring, I think 2 guys from there. No, actually 1 guy from there. So I don't know whether Faith sees the moral of the story, that he did not need a complicated software to actually get me to interact with a potential job seeker. And out of what he did, he started to learn that, hey, by the way, out of this marketplace that I'm trying to build, one of the most valuable things is actually sorting out resumes. It's not actually advertising for the roles of the platform. It's actually sorting out resumes. It's probably where the most value lies for now. I don't know whether that answers the question.
On Walter's question, how do you see into the future as to prepare for it today?
I think the quote by Bill Gates and Roy Amara usually is my starting point, because nobody has a crystal ball of what is going to happen in 10 years. But I think there's an irreducible truth to that particular theory. Actually, today it's actually called Amara's theory of that we almost always overestimate, because we are human beings. We think linearly. So we tend to overestimate what is going to happen in the next 2 years, but we underestimate what is going to happen in 10. Why? Because technology adoption doesn't happen the way we think as human beings linearly. It happens through an S-curve, where you first have some early adopters and then moves into early majority, and then it goes to mainstream. Now, if you just look at today, where we were with cell phones, around 2000, when cell phones used to cost 200K, 300K, and today you go to the village, you'll actually hear people saying, by the way, we are kwangi na simu. It's no longer about, this guy, man, has a phone. So that was the talk in 2098 when guys used to flash around the big Ericssons in a pub or a restaurant for people to see that they have some class. Now, if you go to a village, it has actually, they will say, na huyo hakuangi na simu, because everybody has one. So things change in 10 years significantly. What is going to be happening now from now in 2030 is going to be extremely different. The digital ubiquity that we are seeing today is just 3 a.m. in the morning. You have smartphones that are so powerful, and they'll all be afforded by all those guys you are seeing with Mulika Mwizis. Those guys that are now on Facebook, and you see them doing all sorts of commentary, they will have much more powerful phones than what they have today. Now, you can think about the implications of that on all sorts of things, from cryptocurrencies to blockchain to on-demand e-commerce. The world is going to be very different.
Great, thank you very much for that. Roslyn Manjiru has a question here. She asks, what's your take on disruption or upgrade through blockchain or distributed models based technologies on the future of retail value chains? She also asks, what will e-commerce or digital marketplaces look like about 5 years from now? What are some of the key trends you're seeing in the space? And I believe question number 2, you've tried to tackle a bit on it on matters to deal with what you answered for Walter. So maybe you can take question number 1 from Roslyn on the issues of blockchain and distributed models based technologies on the future of the retail and the value chain.
I do think that the ubiquity of blockchain and cryptocurrencies is actually going to enable so much more trust within distribution of retail and especially e-commerce. Today, customers maybe have to confirm that I've gotten something that was coming from Gobeba and I've paid for it. I think with much better distributed retail models and value chains, first of all, it's very much easy for almost every store to take part in e-commerce and for us to know exactly what each store has at any point in time. I mean, we are just today starting to build the basics of inventory management systems. For even the most sophisticated retailers you see in this country, I can tell you for sure that very, very, very little real-time demand management is in there. So as we move on into where we can build trust levels through blockchain and AI, then it makes it much easier for people to actually order, the guy who is delivering to get paid, and the customer to receive whatever they are receiving, and for them to be able to actually ascertain whether what they have received is even, especially for fresh produce, is actually coming from the right source. Those things, the traceability ones, are going to improve the e-commerce area significantly. That's why I'm saying that nobody really knows how it's going to look like, and nobody has a crystal ball. But as we know, based on Amara theory, is that all these technologies will keep packing on top of each other. It's like the way smartphones and social media have packed themselves on each other. And then what has come out of it is significant media ubiquity. That today something that happens in Busia, almost everybody on Facebook or Twitter can actually get it because they are on phone and they are not waiting to be on their desktop for them to actually get it. So the convergence of blockchain and e-commerce and cloud-based infrastructure of inventory management, where some of these inventories can even be shared across different players, is actually going to enable so much more efficiency that we haven't seen before.
Great, thank you. Actually, our winner, it's good to announce our winner for the first slot to Obujani is Mary Wanyeri for getting all the 3 types of business models at one go without having to mention them, and of course in order. Thank you very much, Mary Wanyeri. Just drop your email address to the panelists together with your phone number, and we will see how best we can get in touch with you and guide you on on what to do in the next steps. Now,
I think there's something I can add to Wanjiro's question.
Right.
On where we see the e-commerce marketplaces looking like.
Yes.
And I think it is an inconvenient truth, but it's actually something that is happening. And I think it's really good. I think the next session we were discussing about having is the impact of e-commerce on fast-moving consumer goods companies. Let me touch a little bit on what I see happen. One is that we saw Nike get out of Amazon, I think last year or the year before, and they've actually been able to grow their e-commerce sales significantly, more than they were doing it while they were on the Amazon marketplace. So I do think that we are going to see a lot of brand e-commerce starting to show up, where Colgate, or Blue Band or Unilever or whoever will start wanting to go direct to customers, because especially in our markets where the value chain is significantly fragmented and there are so many players in between, from the distributor to wholesaler to retailer to even a mama mboga kiosk, they might want to start going direct to customers through their own branded e-commerce platforms. And I think we are also observing a very interesting thing. And I think there's a gentleman in the core who we are starting to work with on Gobeba on honey. The guy produces honey. And you start seeing direct-to-consumer business models of a producer of honey who decides not to go to the retail chains and decides to build ground up an e-commerce platform and then plugs it into the logistics on-demand folks like ourselves, and to actually end up with a delivery. We are also going to see a number of what we call dark stores, which is the retail chain model of an e-commerce logistics, which is, if you think about today, you are better off operating distributed logistics centers rather than a centralized logistics centers in a place like Nairobi. For example, if you have a small dark store here in Jamhuri Park, that could serve the entire of Kileleshwa, Lavington area. If you have one in Rongai, it could actually serve that area of Rongai without necessarily opening it up as a retail chain, but dark stores that probably distribute their wares through different marketplaces like us and others.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for that elaborate answer. Before I actually go to the next two last questions, you'll allow me, because of time, to just take the last two questions for Peter, so that at least we can wind up today's session. It's quite exciting. It's quite exhilarating. I know we are so charged up to hear more about what Peter has to say, because this is the in thing. But then we will have these engagements at least even off the webinar, just to ensure that we keep the conversations going. So the next question, this is where everybody is allowed to answer, but I'm looking for a gentleman. So 5 disruptive forces in retail. What were the 5 disruptive forces in retail that were mentioned by Peter during his presentation? Kindly, so whoever is willing and is yearning to join and appreciate what Abujani has to offer, kindly, please go ahead and type your 5 disruptive forces in retail that were mentioned by Peter. So Peter, the next question is, and this is from Isaac. Isaac says, looks like, and especially he's basically discovered the idea of resilience and patience. Yeah. So looks like building resilience is very important. Mm-hmm. So from 1 to 10 years, just waiting to see results needs resilience, it needs patience to evolve over time. So along the way, challenges crop up definitely, and more players join the market. Okay, so when you're thinking of an idea, someone else is already, either ahead of you or already thinking about something of the same type. So how can we determine a proper mix between evolving markets, challenges, and then of course the resilience comes in?
Yeah, so and I think building a high growth business, and that's why those 3 types of entrepreneurial pursuits are important to know where you want to be. And sometimes if you're in a family setting, you could maybe and say, maybe your wife could engage in the lifestyle business, which can be liquidated in every deal that you do, and maybe you can engage in the high growth one. But it's very important to know that building high growth businesses takes patience. Why? Because as we saw in Amara Law, the adoption of technology takes time. And it's not 2 years time, and that's why you see people get frustrated and jump off. It's not going to be 3 years time, but even though you might not, even though I say you might have to do 10 years, here is the other thing that you also have to bear in mind. One, just like a real estate project, if you are going to, say, for example, develop a housing estate, right? You start maybe in phase one, you develop 10 houses, or you develop 5, or you develop 2. Then phase 2, you're gonna do a certain number. And the project can go on and on for the next maybe 5-7 years. But along the way, you can actually keep selling some of those houses. It's the same thing with building a high growth business. Along the way, you can have some form of liquidity events, which is you could build up to 3 years and you can exit a little bit. You could build up to 5 years and decide, okay, I want to exit, because every customer you add and every profitable customer you add is a value that you add to that business. And that keeps improving the valuation of your business. And especially when it comes to things like new technology-led business models, what you end up having is a good string of innovations that have potential acquisition from the guys that have not been innovating and they are listed today in the Nairobi Stock Exchange. Don't actually even think for 1 minute that those companies don't want to survive. All of them want to survive, but they have lagged behind in innovating. And that's normal for any incumbent to innovate. So you will be in the marketplace soon for those guys to actually acquire you if they want to actually continue innovating. So it takes time, like everything else that is valuable, you have to keep building. Now, how do you then, to your point, balance out evolving markets? I think keeping the eye on the ball, and the eye on the ball is about the customer. It's never about competition. You can look aside, just like the way a runner runs their race by looking side and seeing any competition, but looking behind that competition is a terrible thing. Your forward northern star is the customer. And in this case of marketplaces, is a tool of two-sided, is satisfying those two. For as long as you are seeing growth, then it means that you are actually doing the right things. Obviously, stress testing on any evolving technologies that can fit into what you're building is always important. But worrying so much about competition is actually not, it's neither here nor there.
Great. Thank you very much. Can I just take one or two last questions for you, Peter?
Sure.
Okay, so great chat. So this is Peter. Where your business is under value added type, under the value added type, so how can one successfully launch a winning marketplace where the goods you sell are sourced from another distributor? And then of course he adds on and say, can a kiosk be grown to a greater marketplace? A simple traditional business into a greater marketplace.
There is nothing that cannot be converted into a marketplace for as long as the things I talked about are present. Things like fragmentation of a market. Let's take an example of the kiosk guy that he's talking about. So next to those kiosks, there are usually a number of other kiosk owners, right? So if you told them that actually you can enable them to get what they get from a supplier, they probably would be willing to test with you because they already trust you. Now, the key thing is to know that the skill set required to man a value-added business model and the ones required to man a platform are different. And of course, there's nothing that cannot be learned. So you'll find that you start thinking about things like liquidity, levels of retention, the content quality that you have on where they are getting their goods from. You need to start thinking about building maybe software that might enable them to order through. It could be that now you give them an accounting software or a POS software that enables them to actually do their business easily. And by the time they are using it, they're already using it to actually order through you as a platform. And at that point, you actually convert yourself into a platform.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you so much for that. One of the things you mentioned about retention. And I think I need to bring to all the viewers and participants the fact that our next webinar will come through to talk about customer experience and the new normal imperative. So I hope by the time we are sending out communication to that, you will be really geared and waiting and keen to learn and also grow. And as much as Peter has shared with us a lot of nuggets of wisdom in this, those are golden nuggets of wisdom. I mean, some of us, it's spoken to our hearts and some of the things and the experience that you've had. I mean, from putting classifieds, collecting classifieds and basically creating your own marketplace for classifieds, and then of course also a job marketplace. It's quite interesting to see how when you look at opportunities and see opportunities out there, you shouldn't definitely think twice about them. Don't just think on your feet and just do them. We may not be able to take any more questions at this particular juncture. It's around 5, and some may want to either take their jog, stroll in the evening. It's also good and healthy, but we have quite a good number of other things that we can actually do to engage ourselves. So keep your questions coming. Robert has shared something on Abojani and what Abojani does, and it's quite interesting to have had the pleasure of hosting Peter Ndiangui on this particular session. And for the participants who were able to join us today, I want to thank everybody for the contribution they've made in this particular session. And just to mention our second winner, it looks like the future is female. Our second winner is Faith Berry. So that we close this, we're looking to have 2 individuals who have been able to basically grab a seat for the next online personal finance training. And I hope that out of that particular program, as we engage and communicate and we journey with you, you should be able to learn a little bit more about you and your future. And Abojani is here to assist all of us to grow in our finances, in our financial muscle. It doesn't take, it's not overnight. Financial growth is not overnight, but actually something that actually spills over to a couple of years. Just give yourself time to grow and be confident in your saving. Thank you all for attending once more. Thank you, Peter, for the time you've created to at least spare some bit of wisdom for us. I know you have a lot that you would have wanted to share with all of us, a lot of secrets that you may want to say, what, I have GoBeba, I have another secret, who wants to do this business with me? I mean, you had a lot of things you would have wanted to share with us, but I mean, you know what, time may not allow. So, Peter, just one final thing. GoBeba, what inspired the name GoBeba? You know, there's always a genesis towards something. For us, we many times grapple with things of names. I may start a marketplace and I have no clue how to call it. So I call it Gashungu or Michael. And you know, maybe that may not resonate very well with the people that I am targeting. So how do you go about, and what really inspired you to actually have GoBeba as a name?
So first of all, you see it is actually Beba, right? So we knew that we needed to do something around on-demand logistics, so we wanted something Beba. But we also knew that we wanted to do something around e-commerce, so we wanted the verticals to actually speak to what we are going to do. So each vertical speaks to it. So for example, we have the category we call gas, which is go, beba, gas. So in other words, go and carry gas. Go and bring gas for me. Go and carry shopping for me. Go, beba, shopping. So that was actually what inspired. It was trying to see, okay, can we actually tie all these different categories that we are trying to do with an on-demand platform to point to the fact that we want to bring it to you very, very quickly. And at the same time, it's not a logistics only platform. It is an e-commerce platform blended with on-demand logistics.
Great, thank you. It's a very good way for us to appreciate and understand that your name is your brand, and your brand has to really resonate with very, very, very many people. So if you really can't, sometimes it becomes difficult for people to sell their products when their brands don't really go with what they are really actually doing. So brainstorming on the names is also very important. So as we all go out there, as we all think about marketplaces, and one question was, I think one of the participants was asking about stickiness, and of course this is in regards to link.co.k. Link.co.k is one of the platforms that is Fundi Market.
We could answer that.
Yes, Fundi Marketplace. And maybe you can, yes, you can touch on that, a few points.
Okay. Let's actually resume the sharing, and I'll go direct into something that I talked about. Here we go.
And as Peter puts the slide, Faith, Aberi, please share your email address and also your telephone number to the panelists so we can actually contact you. Asante.
So if you look at there's a slide that I talked about design choices, and it's actually here, and you see that if we really think about what are they called again? Link, right?
Right.
Yeah, there we go. So where would you fit them? So it would be, where would Faith fit them here? And I think the activities they have are probably very low frequency, right? And that's number one, because it's not every day that you actually get a plumber to come over to your house. Doesn't happen weekly, doesn't happen monthly, right? Neither do you get somebody to come and repair your chair every month. Right. So the cleaning bit, again, falls under low frequency and low order value. So that is actually a challenging place to be. The one area that I do think that they can do something, and I think they're already doing something about that, is when it comes to the plumbing and carpentry stuff. The whole thing of trying to set up tools and infrastructure for the guys starts to avoid the gray trade problem, because that would have been the biggest challenge that probably they are facing. Of you go in, the fundi starts to interact with the person directly, and then therefore you lose them. So if you build them tools, either to quote, maybe even on the consumer side, the ability to lend, or the fundis can actually distribute their goods through your platform, like an e-commerce, that starts to actually stabilize that kind of platform. But on the cleaning side, actually yet to see somebody actually solve that problem of the cleaner, which is low order value and low frequency, that also lends itself to a huge great trade when people start interacting with those mamafuas directly.
Great. I think that sums it up, and thank you very much for at least putting that together to at least help us see where that maps out on that particular slide. Mary and Faith, congratulations, and you may send your details to learning@abojani.com. Robert has just indicated there. And at this particular juncture, I cannot, I don't have words to thank you, Peter, for knowledge is power. And if we can use the knowledge you've actually been able to share with us, and we and as participants, for instance, one of the key mandates of Young by Young has been to help young individuals, upcoming tech enthusiasts, to basically look and see through some of the business opportunities that the Industry 4.0 environment is going to provide for them. And it's amazing to appreciate that there's opportunity in platforms, there's opportunity in the marketplace. It's just a matter about sitting down and thinking through what exactly you want to lay out and having a very good selling point. At the end of the day, there are two very important things I'm going to repeat again. Look at your customer acquisition costs. Look at your matters to deal with there's something on the monitoring the unit economics key, because if you cannot do that, it means you're just running for the short run and hoping that you're going to make a kill and then die. A business will die and you don't have. Can we look at sustainability in the marketplace? So going forward, are we hoping we're going to get new Amazons? We're going to get value addition to GoBeba. Who has a value addition to GoBeba? I know for sure Peter will be looking for people to partner with and collaborate and see how they can actually add value to GoBeba to ensure that it grows. He's creating a platform. How do you ride on the platform of GoBeba? So going forward, we are hoping that we are going to be able to add value to ourselves and add value to the nation and the East African or Africa at large. Asante sana, Peter. And if at all there's anything, I don't know whether Robert, I think it's good for me to let you say something. If Robert is around, Robert, are you with us? Robert? Is Robert here?
I can see him.
Yes, he's somewhere there, but now he might have decided to go do some cooking.
Yeah.
Robert? Okay, now that Robert is not with us, we're just representing him as Abu Jani. Oh, Robert, your audio. Let's see. You can't enable. Peter.
Yes.
Do you have some hosting capabilities to enable Robert to
Yeah.
audios? Just check his audio.
Check with audio. Yep. Wait. More. I think I only have more. I have pause recording or stop recording.
Okay, fine. I think that's fine, and there is no problem with that. We can always revisit. I know Robert has been really communicating and engaging the audience on the chat section. So let us all take note of that. One thing is to say thank you once more for all of you who have been able to make it for this, and wishing you all a great e-commerce journey. Let us set up reasonable and workable marketplaces. I think, and even as Peter has said, there's a lot. It is not saturated. So don't think that also because OLX was there or Kilimall is there or Jumia is there, then you can't really do anything much. I think we have a lot of opportunity out here. And as from Peter's guidance and from his presentation, we've seen some light bulb moments for some of us. So thank you very much, Peter. And we look forward to engaging you even more further. So if there are any opportunities, Peter, that you think a young, vibrant community of individuals who are keen on serving and growing at the end of it all, especially in this particular new era, the Industry 4.0, and with the post-COVID-19, and of course, even during right now, there are quite a good number of opportunities. You can also reach out and let us know. As Young by Young, we're keen and willing to engage and help channel that particular energy that you have. And before you grow old, we need that energy before you can grow old, not to help us see the things that we need to see. And thanks for helping us see it clearly. So Asante sana to everybody else. Thank you very much for joining us in the webinar once more. And God bless you all. And may you all have an enjoyable rest of the weekend. And think, this is a weekend not to... Oh, by the way, through GoBeba, you can order your drinks.
Exactly, right now.
Yeah, so starting now, you can order your drinks Peter, why don't you just say the discount so we can have more drinks going through? You are the proprietor here. I mean, so if there's a discount, everybody here would be flocking to go pay. But this is your new club. Actually, business models are changing, I realize. DJs are all everywhere on the internet now.
Exactly. They are all spinning on the internet.
So look at that. And it's attracting a lot of people. So DJs are changing. Clubs and bars will also just go back to our homes. So I've seen estates, people just starting their own small bars. They don't have to go out. So house number A says today we are hosting. So you bring your drinks, or I'm going to provide drinks. So bars, the concept of bars and clubs is changing. People are going to start eating in the neighborhood and not going to hotels because someone has decided to hire outside catering for guys to just come and eat hotel style, 5-star meals and stuff like that. So let us look at that. There's a lot of opportunity. So the challenge will be for those traditional businesses out there and how they're willing to scale up to provide that particular platform. Thank you very much, Peter. And
you're welcome.
And Abu Jani, thank you. And have a very
welcome.
Bye.
Asanteni.
See you. So for those, you can say bye electronically also.
Bye.
For those who are not able to wave. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.